Thanks for joining us on 100% Chance of Wine. I'm your host, Kristen Walls. Washington State is now known worldwide for its wine, but 40 years ago, the industry was in its infancy. Here in Lowden on Highway 12 in 1981, Rick and Darcy Small founded Woodward Canyon Winery. We talked to their children, Sager and Jordan, as they prepare to carry on their parents' dream. Okay, so talk a little bit about your childhood growing up on the vineyard.
We were just always around. I mean, we lived in town, but we just were at the vineyard. We were around the winery. Something I actually pretty distinctly remember is running around the vineyard and rolling down the hills while our dad was checking grapes and stuff and just getting filthy. Being right around the winery and, you know, climbing on pallets of cases of wine, which probably is not necessarily approved, but, you know, running around the barrel rooms, playing hide and seek and all that stuff. So just around it all the time is, you know, even when we were little. And then as we got older, it was just really fun to meet different people in the wine industry. The people involved in the wine industry are really fun. People kind of in the surrounding, you know, whether it's food or art, are also fun. And everybody's doing those sorts of jobs because they love it, and it's not just, you know, paycheck. It's something that you have to really want to do.
What about you, Sager?
Oh man, it's hard to remember that far back. Mostly I just remember like pictures taken of us. The picture of me drinking the juice, yeah. Not wine.
Juice, yeah.
It's the juice.
It's juice, yeah. There's no alcohol in it when it starts,
Yeah, I mean, I just mostly, like you said, I remember running around and kind of, you know, it's kind of a surprise I didn't get injured at any point running around the winery with all the tools and forklifts everywhere and climbing boxes, of course.
Is there a certain moment you can remember that you're like, I'm going to continue on in the wine industry?
My senior year of college, I got to go to Japan with my folks and our national sales director. And that was kind of one of those moments where I was like, wow, we got to do this because we have a winery and we sell wine in Japan. And it just was kind of one of those moments where I was like, yeah, I think I want to do this.
Now you're going more towards the food route. Is that? Why? What made you choose food instead of wine?
I think I always liked that part, like what she was saying about how you get to experience all these different things, new things because of the wine industry. I'd always get brought along to the restaurant or the wine dinner, things like that. So I guess I just got exposed to it a lot when I was younger.
Okay. Talk more about the history of this place.
Yeah, so founded in 1981 by our folks. The vineyard, they started planting in the late 70s, so I think 77, 76, some of the oldest vines were planted. So one of the older vineyards in Walla Walla, one of the older wineries in Walla Walla, and it was pretty limited as far as the wineries. It was a pretty small industry at the time. We were the second winery in Walla Walla, and then Cole next door, they were the third, and then even up until about 1990, there were only about 5 of us around. So it started out pretty small, pretty tight-knit, a lot of camaraderie, people helping each other out.
How proud of you are you of your parents?
Super proud. Yeah, I mean, that's for me one of the reasons why I wanted to come back and continue this legacy. I mean, in the wine industry, just kind of like craft brewing and all these things now, we're starting to see a lot more consolidation, larger corporations and buying smaller family-run wineries because there is no succession plan, because there isn't a second generation that wants to continue on. And so I think I can speak for Sager when I say this too, is that it's really important to us to see what our parents did and to be able to say, hey, we want to keep that going. You know, yeah, we could sell it, but I think I would regret it the rest of my life if we did that.
What do you see for the future?
I don't know. That's kind of where we're at right now. We're
surrounding ourselves with good people and we have a good crew, so like the rest will sort itself out. You know, you just got to set yourself up.
Woodward Canyon gets their grapes from vineyards across the state, but at their estate vineyard a few miles away, grapes are not their only concern. Talk to me about sustainability and what you guys do here.
Yeah, so that's something that both my parents and especially my dad have been pretty passionate about, especially over the last 10 to 15 years, something we've been learning more about and trying to implement as many practices as possible. We're LIVE certified, which is low impact viticulture and enology. We're salmon safe certified, so that's kind of knowing that chemicals will, you know, kind of run downhill towards streams, and so we try to use as little herbicides and pesticides as possible, and that goes for both certifications. Part Part of it is also planting a lot more native vegetation. So we have a little juniper grove that we've planted, and then some wildflowers, things like that, just to kind of create more habitat for beneficial insects. And we have been really working on, especially like the extra grasses and different things we can plant to kind of have those extra habitats for sure.
Now we're starting into the season of harvest. I'm seeing a lot of grapes here that look ready. What's the process you go through to make sure that the grapes are ready to be picked?
Yeah, so it's kind of an exciting time of year as we're starting to see the grapes get ripe. They're starting to evolve, come along in the grapes. One thing we're also looking for is the seeds getting darker. So we've gone through and done some thinning, as you can see kind of on the ground. But if you look at those clusters, they're ones that aren't necessarily, all the grapes aren't purple. So the plants can only support and mature so many clusters. So we kind of go through and take off the stuff we know that's not going to be very good or that isn't going to ripen all the way. So then the stuff that is there can be really good.
Once harvest starts, what's this all going to look like? What's the typical day up here?
So pretty busy. A lot of this stuff in the next couple of weeks will get covered with bird netting to keep the birds out. So that's kind of one of the first steps. When the birds start enjoying the grapes, you kind of know they're getting close. We kind of use that as an indicator to some extent. So bird netting will go on. As you can see now, the little metallic strips, those are also to kind of dissuade the birds from enjoying the grapes. So that'll be kind of the next step. And then the crews will come through, everything's harvested by hand. It's all handwork up here, so they'll just all have big totes come through, snip off the clusters into the totes, put them into big white bins, and then we'll fill up the flatbed truck and haul those all down to the winery, and then the winemaking team takes over from there. So here we have a bunch of Merlot, and it's looking really good. I mean, the clusters are nice and tight. You're getting a nice dark color. Sometimes you get on some spots what you call wings, which is little tiny clusters hanging off, and so those usually won't get ripe. So we're not seeing any of those. Could be that our team has already cut those off and have them down here. And at this point we can actually taste it and see. Those are definitely getting sweeter. So obviously
very seedy.
Yes. So really your ratio of like juice to skin and seed is pretty low, because you're seeing a lot of, you have that skin and the seeds, and then just only a little bit of juice and pulp in there.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of that natural tannin comes from, so that skin. And then the seeds, you can see they're just starting to kind of turn from green to brown, and so they're getting there. Sometimes it's tricky because you are waiting for flavors to mature while sugars are maturing, so it's kind of a very delicate balance of trying to hit that. So if the sugar gets too high, you can have a really high conversion to alcohol and have a really high alcohol wine, and so we definitely try to avoid that. We really like balanced wines, so we don't want the alcohol to necessarily be overpowering or the only thing people notice in the wine. So we're very conscious of the sugar levels as we're getting close to harvest and keeping track of when the grapes are ready to be picked.
About how many clusters would it take for a bottle of wine?
The way we figure, so I always think we think about grapes in tons, because that's how we measure them as they come off the plants. And the big white bins we have are about half a ton, and that will make about 1 barrel of wine.
Okay.
And it really depends on the plant, the different kinds of grapes. Syrah, for instance, has bigger berries that like Merlot does. So it's pretty variable on what kind of yields you get. Up here, we usually figure we get around 2 tons per acre, which is, I think, a little maybe lower than average. But when you're making premium wines, that's kind of your goal, is to get that lower tonnage, assuming that the quality is going to be higher.
Mm-hmm. So you get to see this process from start to finish, and you actually get to see the consumer taste your product. How does that feel? I know for some farmers you don't get that enjoyment of someone enjoying your product.
Yeah, no, it's very rewarding to be able to be a part of it and to see something like, here we have the grapes. We were up here looking at these before there were even grapes on this plant in the winter and the spring, and then it's a long turnaround. It'll be a few years before anybody gets to drink wine that was produced from these grapes, but especially from our estate fruit, to know that we grew it, we took care of it, we harvested it, we made it at our winery, we produced it, we bottled it, and then we were able to hand it to a consumer and see them enjoy it is pretty cool. Like you said, a lot of farmers don't get to see that. Folks who maybe grow wheat or potatoes or something, it just goes off and goes away, and they don't get to see that end consumer enjoying their product. So it's pretty cool.
We're now down in the wine cellar. What's the purpose for people that don't know of a wine cellar?
So for us, we really wanted to keep a lot of our older wines. So starting back in 1981, after my dad's first vintage, he wanted to set some wine aside each year so we could go back and visit that wine, taste it, see how it's evolving. He had kind of learned about that, and when he was traveling in Europe and had seen a lot of the places in Bordeaux have these immense cellars of all the wines they've produced over the years. So yeah, going back to our first vintage of 1981, we have wine from every vintage after that, just to keep those, see how they're evolving. And it's even been really helpful in years like 2010 and 2011 were cooler vintages. So my dad and Kevin could come down here and maybe pull a bottle from another cooler vintage like 1993 or 1999, taste that wine, and then kind of think about how to grow the grapes, how to make the wine differently, and just kind of have that even for educational purposes.
I've never thought about that. That's such a good idea for them to go ahead and do that. So how do you know when you say the 1981, does it still age in the bottle? Does it still have, what's the flavor going to be like?
So it's going to be quite a bit different, an older wine, and that's kind of one thing we always make sure if people want to, are interested in library wines, know that it's not going to taste like it did 10, 20 years ago. So a lot of that bright fruit that might have been there is going to be gone. That tannin structure is not going to be quite as strong, but some of those things like the tannin and higher acidity are what help a wine age. So those are some of the things that we think about when we're making wine to make those wines balanced and have, decent acid and not too high of alcohol and have good tannin structure to help them age. And, every wine's different. Some wines we've gone through and tasted and said, you know what, I think this one might be past its prime. And then sometimes we'll go back. We tasted in 1987. I think it was maybe this winter, which is my brother's birth year, and it was amazing. It was still really, really good. So we just kind of here and there taste stuff. And
you just never know what you're going to get. It's kind of a surprise that you're...
It is, yeah. And, it does help if it's a cooler vintage because like I was saying, you tend to have more tannin and better acid and things like that to help that wine age. But I think there's been some surprises where we thought it would age longer and then it didn't, but we thought it wouldn't age as long, for another one, and it, aged longer than we thought. So it's, it's kind of a fun surprise, and it's fun for us as a staff and a family to be able to taste those wines. And for both me and my brother, my dad did some large format bottlings for both of us of our birth years. So when my husband and I got married, we opened a 15-liter of 1983. So that was pretty special. My brother has a 1987, and that's 18 liters. So we're like, come on, let's get married so we can taste that wine. He had some foresight to do some fun things like that for us. And
if you could pick any wine down here, just on a random night, what would you come down and grab?
I think it would have to probably be one of our special selection wines, which is a wine we've produced just a handful of times. And it's only when the wine is really, really good. It's really a reserve wine in that sense. And we don't get to taste those very often because they're so limited. So I'd probably pick one of those from the 90s to try. Yeah.
Having a cork versus a screw cap. I mean, does it make a difference?
The biggest difference is, at least for a long time, the cork let more oxygen through. And so that was kind of the idea of, having cork in those wines that are going to age because that oxygen will help the wine age. Screw cap was predominantly for wines that were meant to be sold and consumed earlier. Now, though, the technology is changing a lot, so you can actually get liners for the screw caps that kind of mimic the oxygen exchange of a cork. I think if it were up to our winemaker, we would probably switch everything to screw cap. But a lot of customers still love that nostalgia of popping that cork out and, having that special kind of ritual.
So one thing that's unique to Woodward Canyon is the restored 1870s farmhouse that you're using for the tasting room.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. It was actually the home of the superintendent and teacher of L'École School. So L'École was actually a school. L'École is French for school, and so it was actually a schoolhouse. My dad went to school there. Oh, and cool. So the farmhouse was the home for the instructors and the superintendent.
So what's the very first wine?
So the first one I have for you today is our Washington State Chardonnay. So 100% Chardonnay, and this one is a blend from the Celilo vineyard, which is down in the Columbia Gorge, and then also our estate vineyard.
Now, what are some of the flavors that I would taste?
So our Chardonnay tends to be pretty bright. We tend to get a lot of kind of like pear flavors
I could taste
on
the
the
pear in
Chardonnay.
it.
That's one thing I always get when I taste our Chardonnay. Little bit of that oak character, just for maybe another layer of complexity, but we don't want it to be overly oaky. We don't want it to just taste like oak.
This perfectly balanced to me.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we always strive for in our wines is balance. It's something we're always thinking about all the way from when we're harvesting the grapes to, you know, putting the blends together, having that acidity and the flavors balance, the tannin, which is kind of that grippy sensation you get from a lot of red wines. Have all those things just be in proportion, so not one thing stands out too much.
So the next wine.
Next up is our Columbia Valley Merlot, the 2013. 100% Merlot, and again a blend of some fruit from our state vineyard and then also from the Weinbau vineyard, which is located over closer to the Yakima area. We tend to have people actually like our Merlot who aren't necessarily Merlot people. Fortunately, Merlot took a big hit with Sideways, which is amazing. A movie could have that kind of impact, but we're still seeing that people aren't really interested in Merlot. So sometimes it takes a little bit of cajoling and convincing to get people to try it, but it's really a beautiful
very
wine.
Earthy. What are some of the other flavors that you would taste in this one?
So on our Merlot, I usually get a lot of nice like dark fruit flavors, like some cherry, some blackberry, things like that. Sometimes we blend a little bit of other Cabernet Franc or Cabernet Sauvignon in there, but this year it's 100% Merlot, and that just really depends from year to year, kind of how we end up doing the blend. But yeah, I love our Merlot. It's one of my favorites. It's a wine actually that can age pretty well. We've tasted some of our Merlots from the 90s that are holding up pretty well. So that's been fun to see, especially how the Merlots do. We're kind of known for Cab and Chardonnay. Those are the two varietals that we're probably most popular for, but when we can convince people that there's good Merlot and that we have a good Merlot, that's always nice to have them kind of say, oh yeah, that is good, I do like that. I don't normally like Merlot. So it's always nice to hear that. All right, so next up I have our Artist Series Cabernet. This one's one of our flagship wines, so we're really well known for this one. It goes out to distribution quite a bit. So you can find this in restaurants and grocery stores around the country. But it's a really fun wine. We've been doing it since 1992, and we feature a different artist every year. So it's always someone from the Northwest or with a connection to the Northwest.
Now, what are some of the flavors that I would taste in this wine?
So this is our Cabernet. So it's a little bit bigger than the Merlot, a little more tannin. So we'll use a little bit more new oak on this one. So a few more new barrels. And again, you're going to get some of those dark fruit characteristics, but a little bit more of that tannin structure on that cab.
Tastes a little bit of spiciness to it.
Yeah. So it's, again, great food wine, great like steakhouse wine. So it goes really well with red meats.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Steak and wine is always a good combination.
Yes, for sure. It's always a fun wine, always changes. People look forward to this one. It's kind of one they buy every year. They come every year to our holiday barrel tasting, which is in December. It's when we release the wine. So folks kind of come looking specifically for the artist series, and oftentimes the artist is here so they can meet the artist. And
that's cool.
Yeah, so it's really fun.
Okay, so the next wine that you have.
Yes, this is our Woodward Canyon Old Vines Cabernet. So this is one we've actually been doing since we started in 1981. It was initially called the Dedication Series, and we featured on the label a different Walla Walla Pioneer every year. So it's been a number of different folks that were kind of important to Walla Walla. The first gentleman we featured is A.P. Woodward, who is the namesake for the Woodward Canyon where my dad grew up and where our vineyard is now located. We only started calling it Old Vines in the mid-90s because we felt like then the vines were old enough. There's no real rule on what you can label something as old vines, so there's no, it has to be 20 years or 25 years, but we figure around 25 years we feel comfortable for Washington State, obviously calling it old vines. It's in the grand scheme of wine around the world, 25 years isn't that old for vines.
Yeah.
But in the New World, in the United States and Washington, those are some of the oldest vines. Wine tasting can definitely be intimidating. So it's actually been nice for us to see some younger people come over the last few months. We always try to tell people it's not stuffy, it's fun. It comes down to whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
We're kind of open to everybody, so we try to be really accommodating, help people kind of learn about wine, and ultimately, like I said, it's whether you like it or not.
Woodward Canyon Winery's summertime lunch menu centers around this wood-fired pizza oven, but it's the ingredients that go into it that make it really special. So just talk to me about your garden. I know you said you just were certified.
Yeah, so we just finished the process of certification. So I did the whole process. Requires, saving all your labels, saving receipts, anything that goes into the garden. We use, a bone meal and local compost that's also organic. So just keeping a lot of paperwork and keeping track of everything is mostly what that is. It's almost like keeping a journal of what you do in the garden every day and making sure that you keep track of your receipts as well and where things go.
So talk to me about the what you have in the garden right now.
Okay, so we're growing 3 varieties of tomatoes, a Thessalonian tomato, a Santorini tomato, and a San Marzano. 2 of those are mostly for fresh eating, and the San Marzano is for canning, and we'll use that on our pizza, make sauce from it. And then we also grow 4 different peppers rather. We have peppercini, a sweet red Italian pepper, piquillo pepper, and a padron pepper. In addition to that, we grow southern French Mediterranean melon called the petit gris, and a salad cucumber, sweet onions and cipollini onions, and we did a little bit of Calabrian broccoli this year. And the Calabrian broccoli really loves the heat, so it's doing really well. And we've got a lot of that, so we'll definitely do that again next year.
How do you pick your...
Just things I like, mostly. Things that I've worked with and things that I like. One of the nice parts about having a garden and just the way we have our food program set up is a lot of chefs, especially like in Seattle where I used to work, they'll see a product and they'll really like it and they think, where can I order this, or who sells this, where can I get it from? And I just kind of think, how can I get seeds? Can I find organic seeds and can I grow it here? Mm-hmm. So I kind of get to cut out the middleman and do it my way, which is kind of, well, sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But I moved to Seattle right after high school. So I spent that time exclusively working in restaurants, most of which were French restaurants. It was a good experience and I learned a lot. I got back and did the food program last year, and that was more of a sit down, higher end kind of experience, and I would do fresh pasta I'd make daily and have a little bit more protein and steak and things like that. And this year I wanted to make it more casual and something where I could go out and talk to people more easily and tell them about the food and where it comes from and how much we grow. And so we condensed it down to pizza and salads and vegetable sides that we all can do from the wood-fired oven. Mm-hmm. And so that way if people have questions, I can tell them where everything comes from. I can tell them everything on the pizza, where the meat and the cheese and the vegetables all the way to the flour. So I think
that's very cool, yeah.
Lowden way of making pizza, you're not allowed to use like rolling pins. Everything needs to be done by hand. So this sauce is made from the Thessaloniki and Santorini tomatoes. You grab a hunk of mozzarella. This is made in California, and I still get it shipped from Seattle. All right, so sauce, olive oil, cheese, and the salami. This is, I believe, around 6:57 in the area. I'm gonna try to get the pizza towards the back there. So it's pretty loaded up right now. First things first, you gotta make sure it's gonna come off. So it can start it out there, it's pretty good.
How many do you make a day?
We'll make like 40 around there. A lot of people share it, so it seems like more. Yeah. That's a really nice looking pie right there. So one of our tasting room staff calls this our estate pizza because a lot of the ingredients come from the estate. And I kind of like that name. We just kind of had the idea to do it. We wanted to do something more casual, more fun on the patio, and I'd get a chance to talk to people and tell them about the ingredients. I think is an important part. So if someone has a question or if I overhear something, I can chime in and tell them, we grow the tomatoes or my cousin grows the flour, and, tell them where everything comes from.
So beautiful place to stop. We knew we were going to arrive around lunchtime, so we heard about the great wood-fired pizza, and it lived up to the hype. It was delicious.
What kind of pizza did you guys get?
We had the meat pizza, and I have a lot of respect for the guy behind us.
It's great. It's fantastic. They were very accommodating. They set up a picnic in the backyard for us and did our wine tasting out there, so we've had a lovely time.
What did you think of Sager's pizza?
Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah. Amazing.
What pizza did you get?
Oh, we got all of them. All that was available.
Thank you for joining us on our visit to Woodward Canyon. Please tune in next time as we visit another local Washington winery.